There is a two-bedroom house in the Florida Panhandle listed right now for $48,500. That is less than a used pickup truck. In a state where the typical home costs nearly $400,000, whole houses are still trading for the price of a mid-size sedan. It is not a scam. It is not a typo. It is not a condemned shell with a raccoon living in the kitchen. It is a real house in a real town with a roof and a deed and a mailbox out front. And it is one of 12 towns we are going to walk through today, each one cheaper than the last, ending with the single cheapest county in the entire state of Florida, a place where the median home price has dipped below $100,000. This is not the Florida of the postcards. This is not the Florida they put in the brochure. This is the Florida that the Boone forgot. And this is not a story about broken down towns with nothing to offer. This is a story about a hidden line running through the middle of the state. A line that divides the Florida where money piles up from the Florida where money never arrived. And understanding which side of that line you are standing on is the difference between the best deal of your retirement and the worst financial mistake you have ever made. If you own a home in Florida, or you are even thinking about buying one, subscribe to this channel right now, because your town is going to show up on a list like this eventually, and you want to see the numbers before everyone else does. Here is the one thing you need to understand before we start counting down. Florida is really two states wearing the same name. There is the coast, Miami, Tampa, Naples, Fort Lauderdale, the places where money and hurricanes both pile up, where a modest 3-bedroom can run you $500,000 and your insurance bill reads like a car payment. And then there is the interior, timber country, sugarcane country, cattle ranches and pulp mills and state prisons and little courthouse towns where the population has not grown in 40 years. The housing boom drove a highway straight past these places and never looked back. Every single town on this list sits far from a beach and far from an interstate. That distance is the entire story. It is why they are cheap. And here's the part nobody expects, the part we will get to at the end. It is also the only reason some of these homes are still insurable at all. Keep that in the back of your mind. It matters more than the price on the listing. Number 12, LaBelle and Clewiston, Hendry County, deep in the South Florida interior, right on the shore of Lake Okeechobee. The county home value index sits around $279,000, and that makes this the cheapest corner of South Florida by a wide margin. Drive an hour in any direction and you hit the expensive coasts. Fort Myers to the west, West Palm Beach to the east, Naples to the southwest. But here, in the Sugar Belt, the landscape is flat cane fields stretching to the horizon. And the town of Clewiston still calls itself America's sweetest town because U.S. Sugar has had its headquarters there since before your parents were born. The heat is brutal. There is no beach, and the economy runs on agriculture and not much else. But if you want to live in South Florida, real South Florida, and you cannot stomach a $400,000 mortgage, Hendry County is the only door still open. The question is whether you can handle the quiet that comes with it. Number 11, Sebring, Highlands County, in the central part of the state. The home value index here runs around 241,000, and it has actually slipped about 2% year over year. Recent sales are closing closer to 219,000. Sebring is built around Lake Jackson and one of the most famous racetracks in the world, the Sebring International Raceway, home of the legendary 12-hour endurance race. Retirees have been settling here for decades, drawn by the lakes and the low prices. And every March, the racing crowd floods in and reminds the town it exists. But the rest of the year, Sebring is quiet, inland, and a long drive from anything resembling a coastline. That is the trade. You get the lake sunsets and the small town pace. You give up the ocean and the convenience of a major metro. For a lot of people over 55, that math works perfectly. For others, the isolation starts to weigh on you by the second winter. Number 10, Lake City, Columbia County, North Central Florida. Median home price here sits around $215,000, and the cost of living runs roughly 18% below the national average. Lake City is the cheapest real city on this list, not a tiny crossroads, but an actual functioning small city, because it sits right at the junction of Interstate 75 and Interstate 10. That crossroads makes it a trucking and logistics hub. And there is a VA hospital here that employs a significant chunk of the local workforce. National Forest rings the town on nearly every side. If you are a veteran or you depend on VA care, Lake City is one of the few places in Florida where you can buy a home for under $250,000 and still be within minutes of a full-service medical center. That combination is rare, and it is the reason this town has held its population steady while other rural Florida towns have been quietly bleeding out. Number 9. Arcadia, DeSoto County, in the southwest interior. The county median has dropped to around $171,000. And here is the number that should make you sit up straight. Prices in this market have fallen roughly 29% year over year. That is not a typo either. Arcadia is a cowboy town, home to one of the oldest rodeos in the state, with an antiques district that draws weekend browsers from Sarasota and Fort Myers. It sits about 40 miles inland from the wealthy Gulf Coast, just far enough to be invisible to the money. It was hammered by Hurricane Charlie in 2004, and hammered again by Hurricane Ian in 2022. And that 1-2 punch over 18 years has left a mark on the housing stock that the market has not forgotten. A nearly 30% price decline in a single year tells you that sellers are getting desperate and buyers are not showing up. If you can stomach the hurricane history and the distance, there is real value here. But understand what you are buying into. Number 8. Avon Park, Highlands County, back in the Central Ridge. Median sale prices have come in around $190,000, down more than 10% year over year. Avon Park calls itself the crown jewel of the Ridge, and it earned that title during the 1920s Florida land boom, when developers built grand hotels and sold lots to northern dreamers who believed the boom would never end. It ended, and Avon Park never fully recovered. The citrus groves that replaced the dreams have been shrinking for decades, and the retirees who trickle in are drawn by the price, not the glamour. There is no coastline, no major employer pulling in young families, and the housing stock skews old. But a home for under $200,000 in Florida, in a town with actual sidewalks and a downtown, is becoming almost impossible to find anywhere else in the state. That scarcity is the only thing keeping Avon Park on the map for buyers. Number 7. Palatka, Putnam County, in the northeast, sitting right on the St. Johns River. Home values here land somewhere in the range of $177,000 to $197,000, depending on which block you are standing on. Palatka was once the bass capital of the world, a thriving river and lumber port where steamboats docked and tourists came to fish. That was a long time ago. Decades of economic decline have hollowed out much of the downtown, and the population has been flat or falling for years. But here is what the data does not tell you. Palatka is roughly an hour from St. Petersburg, Augustine, one of the most visited small cities in America, and it sits on one of the most beautiful rivers in the southeast. There is a version of the future where that proximity matters, where remote workers and adventurous retirees discover Palatka the way they discovered Asheville 20 years ago. There is also a version where nothing changes and the decline continues. Which version you believe determines whether Palatka is a hidden gem or a value trap. Number 6. Madison, Madison County, in North Florida along the Big Bend, halfway between Tallahassee and the Swanee River. Trailing sale medians here have been coming in between $139,000 and $150,000, and the home value index has been falling around 13% year over year. Madison is an antebellum courthouse town, the kind of place where the county building has columns, and the live oaks have been there longer than the state itself. The economy is thin, leaning on government jobs and agriculture, and the young people who grow up here tend to leave for Tallahassee or Jacksonville and not come back. What remains is a quiet, deeply historic small town where you can buy a solid older home for what some people in Miami spend on a parking space. The catch is that thin economy. If the one employer in a town like this closes or cuts back, there is no safety net, and resale becomes a prayer. Quincy, Gadsden County, in North Florida, about 25 minutes from the state capital in Tallahassee. The home value index sits around $155,000. Gadsden County is Florida's only majority black county, and Quincy's history contains one of the strangest financial stories in the entire South. In the early 1900s, a local banker named Pat Monroe convinced his neighbors and clients to buy stock in a little Atlanta soda company called Coca-Cola. They did. And for a brief, surreal stretch of the 20th century, Quincy was reputedly the richest small town per capita in America, a place where farmers and shopkeepers held Coke dividends worth more than their houses. That wealth is gone now, dispersed across generations. And today, Quincy is among the cheapest towns in the state. The contrast between what this town once was and what it costs today is the kind of thing that stops you cold. 25 minutes from a state capital, a home for under $160 in a town that once minted millionaires from a soft drink. The proximity to Tallahassee jobs is the real draw. The question is whether the town can rebuild around it. Number 4, Marianna, Jackson County, in the Panhandle. The county median sits around $120,000. And this is where that house lives, the one from the opening. A 2-bedroom, 1-bath home listed at $48,500. A whole house in the state of Florida for less than a used car. Marianna is the Panhandle County seat, and its economy leans heavily on a state prison and farming. Hurricane Michael tore through here in 2018 as a Category 5 storm and flattened parts of the county that still have not been rebuilt. That damage, combined with the thin job base and the distance from any major city, has suppressed home values to a level that genuinely looks like a typo on a listing site. But it is not a typo. It is the real cost of living in a place where the last major hurricane left scars you can still see from the road. $48,500 buys you a roof, 4 walls, and every risk that comes with them. That is the deal, and you need to see it with open eyes. Number 3, Bonifay, Holmes County, deeper into the Panhandle. The home value index here is around 142,000, and right now there are more than 50 homes in the county listed under $100,000. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath house is sitting on the market for $120,000. Holmes County is one of the least populated counties in all of Florida, a tiny rodeo and agriculture town best known for the Northwest Florida Championship Rodeo. There is no major highway running through it, no tourist draw, no employer large enough to anchor a workforce. What there is land, quiet, and a price point that has essentially vanished from the rest of the state. If you are the kind of person who wants acreage, a garden, a porch, and nothing on your calendar, Bonifay will sell you that life for less than a condo deposit in Jacksonville. But know that the nearest major hospital is a real drive, and if you need to sell that house in 5 years, the buyer pool is very, very small. Number 2, Perry, Taylor County on the Big Bend Gulf Coast. The county median home price is around $100,200, and the average annual property tax bill is $724. Let that land for a second. $724 a year in property tax. Perry is a pulp mill timber town with access to the Gulf through the little fishing village of Steinhatchee. But there are no beach resorts here, no tourist infrastructure, no condo towers. Hurricane Idalia came ashore in 2023 and battered this stretch of coast badly, and the recovery has been slow. The town's economy has always depended on the timber industry, and when a mill cut shifts, the whole county feels it. But a home for $100,000 with a $700 tax bill in a state with no income tax is a combination that simply does not exist anywhere else in Florida. That is the math that keeps drawing people to look. Whether they stay depends on how much isolation they can handle. Now, before we get to the single cheapest county in the entire state, I want to mention something because a lot of you keep asking the same question in the comments. If these towns are this cheap, where should I actually buy, and where should I stay away from entirely? We built the Florida Buy and Avoid list for 2026 to answer exactly that. It covers 40 Florida towns, 20 to buy and 20 to avoid, with the real numbers on home prices, insurance, and risk for every single one. It is called the Florida Buy and Avoid List 2026, and you can find it at floridapulse.gumroad.com/l/ebook. The link is in the description. But stay right here, because the cheapest town in all of Florida is next. And the reason it holds that title is the part of this story that reframes everything. Number 1, Cross City, Dixie County, deep in the Big Bend along the Nature Coast. The county median home price is approximately $96,900. That is the lowest in the entire state of Florida. Not the lowest in the Panhandle. Not the lowest in the rural north. The lowest anywhere. Cross City is a former timber and prison town sitting in the middle of swamp and forest, ringed by the Lower Swanee National Wildlife Refuge. There is no interstate within an hour. There is no tourism industry. There is no beach. The town's population is measured in hundreds, not thousands. And a house here costs less than a luxury SUV sitting in a Miami driveway right now. This is the absolute floor of the Florida housing market, the place where the price finally runs out of room to fall. And standing here, looking at a listing under $100,000 in a state where the median is 4 times that, you have to ask yourself the question that every one of these 12 towns is really asking you. Is cheap enough? Here is the twist that rewards you for staying this long. The reason these towns are cheap: distance from the coast. Florida currently has the highest home insurance premiums in America, averaging $8,292 a year statewide in 2025, 2 to 3 times the national average. On the coast, that number can run $6,000 to $9,000 or more for a single home. But inland north central Florida, exactly where these 12 towns sit, insurance premiums drop dramatically, running roughly $1,800 to $2,900 a year. So the cheap house is not just cheap to buy, it is one of the only places left in Florida where you can still afford to keep it. Pair that with no state income tax and a property tax bill that in Holmes County averages $527 a year, or in Taylor County, $724. And the annual cost of owning one of these homes is a fraction of what a coastal homeowner pays just in insurance alone. The catch that keeps them cheap has not changed. No jobs, old housing stock, long drives to a hospital, repeated hurricane damage, and a buyer pool so thin that selling can take years. Cheap is real. But cheap is a trade, and you need to understand both sides of it before you sign anything. So here is what you actually do before you fall in love with a $48,000 listing. First, pull a home insurance quote before you make an offer, not after. Because in parts of Florida, the insurance bill can dwarf the mortgage payment. And if you cannot get coverage, you cannot close. Second, check the flood zone and the age of the roof, because those 2 things alone determine whether an insurer will even write you a policy. Third, look at the hurricane history for that specific town, not just the county, the town, and ask how long the last recovery took. And fourth, measure the drive to the nearest hospital and the nearest real job center, because a cheap house you cannot insure, cannot sell, and cannot get to a doctor from is not a deal. The price on the listing is just the front door. What matters is everything behind it. So now I want to hear from you, because this is the part of the conversation that actually matters. Which of these 12 towns would you genuinely consider moving to, and why? What is the cheapest house you have seen listed in your county right now? And does the price make you excited or suspicious? And the big one, the one I keep turning over in my own head, is there a price low enough that the trade-offs stop mattering? Or does every cheap town in Florida come with a catch that no price can fix? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And if you are the kind of person who watches a video